Hello, this is a tutorial on how to make bass sounds on the Analog 4. And I wrote down some general tips that are good for bass sounds. Then we're going to go into a bit more detail on how to make it a bit more organic. And finally we have a nice LFO trick for 16th notes, and I'll talk briefly about a few other cool things. So let's start with this, the general settings. I usually set the tune to -24 or -36 instead of just turning the switching octaves, because when I'm saving the sound it will be at the correct octave, so that when if this is the bass sound and then I switch to a different sound or preview a different sound, it'll be on the same octave, but it'll be more appropriate for bass. And I can show you briefly. Let's see. So here we have just some sounds, and this is a bass sound, but we're still on the same octave. But yeah, so setting the tune instead of just changing the octave is pretty handy. When we're using the second oscillator, I like to use Detune to make it a bit wider. So I'll set this one to -12 and then detune it. And the difference between detune and fine tune at higher octaves, you can hear the detune just as much here as down here. But with the detune, the linear detune, it'll start to go away, or the difference will be a bit smaller the higher up you go. So if we want to hear the detune up here, we'll have to set it to 46 or something, and then if we go back down, the difference is huge. So linear detune is basically for bass sounds. And so yeah, fine tune also works, but one thing I don't like about this is when I hold function and then turn the coarse tune, it'll reset the fine tune as well. So I use the detune knob for when I'm detuning. And the next step is to use the second filter as a bass boost. So if you go to the filter page and then turn up the filter key track to 32, and then just max the resonance and then do a sweep, you'll hear that around 30 or 31. That's the sweet spot for the bass sound. And the reason we want key tracking is because the filter will follow the note. If we turn off key tracking, it'll be perfect here, but the resonance won't follow. So yeah, filter key tracking at 32 will make it follow. And you don't need 100 or full resonance. You can, it's very noticeable at around 20. Let's see. Yeah, 20, between 20 and 40 is just fine. And I like using the bass boost because at lower frequencies, if we take the filter cutoff down here, the volume is a lot lower than up here. But with a bit of bass boost, it's a bit more audible down here. Then there's the chorus. It's on the amp page. It's nice to just widen the sound a bit. I like to put it at about half, 64. And then there's a bit of noise. It's on the oscillator page, the first oscillator page. If you press it twice, you get to the noise page, and then just add a little bit of noise. And the nice thing about noise is it'll really affect overdrive. So let's use the new overdrive sound. If we turn off the noise and then slowly increase it, it'll change the resonance peak sound on the overdrive. Well, it wasn't so dramatic on this one. Okay, it was basically only on the new overdrive on the right side. And oops. Let's set this up again. $32. Then we can start changing things to make it less perfect. And yeah, let's start with this one. We can add a bit of slow vibrato by going into the second oscillator 2 page. And there are these two, vibrato speed and depth. Just a little bit of these is usually, it goes a long way, just add a bit of these. And yeah, you can use an LFO to change the second oscillator's pitch. So if we change the, I'm on the first LFO page, I'll set the destination to oscillator 2 pitch mod, and anything between 10 and 20 is more than enough. And then slow it way down. And this introduces a bit of movement that wasn't there before. And there's a cool alternative for the saw oscillator. Instead of using the saw, you can use the triangle wave and set the pulse width all the way to the left or right. And then you can use the built-in LFO to make it the pulse width move back and forth. And if you do this on the bass sound, it'll be, it's not a huge difference, but there's a bit more movement than before. And I usually don't have that much delay on the bass, but if you're using playing long notes, so let's just increase the release and increase the attack. If we add delay to this, actually, I think maybe I already, yeah. I reset the delay page. And the default delay settings are a bit too muddy for bass. But what you can do instead is to use on the, if you go to the FX track and then go to delay, you can cut all the bass out of the delay and also cut all the highs. And that way you can increase the feedback to make it last longer without being too present, sort of. So if we do it on this sound, oh yeah, and I also like to have ping pong enabled. And the next thing we can do is use an LFO to make 16th notes a lot easier. So the first thing we want to do is set the amp and filter envelopes to have long decays and long releases. And let's also remove delay and increase the envelope depth on the filter. And now that we have long release on both the amp and filter envelope, we can use an LFO with a saw shape. So let's go to LFO page 2 and then set the shape to saw, set the speed to 32 and multiplier to 64, and then set the trig mode to trig. That way it will always reset the LFO on every trig. So let's set the destination to filter frequency 1. And this is also very useful for if you're using performance knobs or the performance macros. where you can you could, for example, have one macro to control the cutoff and oscillator 2 level, and another macro to control the 16th notes. So you have more control over the intensity of the sound, but also the urgency of the bass line. And yeah, some other tips is 2-voice unison. Yeah, it's function and mix to go into the polyconfig, and then press the tracks you want to be unisoned, and then set the allocation to unison. So I recorded, or I copied a drum track from another pattern. So let's just record something. And the thing with unison is that it makes the sound a lot louder, so you can turn down the track level. And yeah, so two-voice unison is very nice, but if your track can't afford it, you can always just use chorus. Which sounds pretty nice without using two voices. But yeah, if you can afford it, the two-voice unison is pretty nice. And the other thing is you can use the second oscillator to play a fifth higher than the first oscillator. And it's a nice way to get around the 4-voice limitation. If you want to use fifth, it's a bit difficult to use it to make a melody by p-locking the chorus tune separately from the first one. It's a bit difficult. It's possible, but it's a lot of work. And the third thing is to use the sub-oscillator not for more bass, but for a different flavor. So let's try this one. Let's try it on only the first oscillator. Yeah, the next thing is there's the overdrive has two settings. There's the new Mark II overdrive, that sounds pretty nice, and then there's the old overdrive from Mark I, which is pretty unique, I think, because it's easier to hear it on just a plain sound. So let's go make just a saw sound. And the Mark II overdrive it sounds pretty what I'd expect an overdrive to sound like. So it's a bit more predictable than the old Mark I overdrive, which sounds like this. And the thing I noticed about the Mark I overdrive is that it sort of chokes the resonance scream. Usually when you have high resonance, I'll just lower this one because it's going to be a lot louder than this. I have high resonance, and the Mark II overdrive makes it louder. But the Mark I overdrive on the left side actually lowers or chokes the resonance. So yeah, listen to this compared to the other sound. Compared to the Mark II sound, which goes like this. And the cool thing I noticed about this is, let's increase the amp release and filter envelope release. Yeah, the cool thing I noticed is that if we set the overdrive right to the point where it stops or it starts choking the resonance sound, and then we increase the resonance, you get this really cool screaming sound that isn't really sharp or loud, it's just very prominent somehow. And yeah, that's another thing, is that the Mark I overdrive it feels like it's muffling the entire sound, making it softer, while the new Mark II sound makes it harsher. And yeah, so there's a cool balance between high resonance and high overdrive that you can use this in a bass sound, which I did on this one, resonant bass. So yeah, let's try copying this sound to the track where I have some trigs. And yeah, so that's the cool, interesting Mark I overdrive sound. I think I'll be doing more tutorials, probably more short ones like this. I tried squeezing even more stuff into this video, but I ended up just noodling around, and that might not be that interesting to watch. So I'll stop here, and thanks for watching.